Okay, our meeting is now in session. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing for a moment of silence.
Take a moment to remember the 8 firefighters and 8 police officers that have passed since our last board meeting.
Thank you. Please be seated. Okay. Well, let's get started here. And with this month's meeting, we have first up our years of service recognition. Chief John Trotwine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good evening, everyone. It's with great pleasure and honor that I get the privilege to announce one of our employees hit a benchmark 15 years of service. That's our telecommunications manager, Bob Moats. Bob, can you stand up? Give you a hand. So you can see Bob is well liked because his whole team was here tonight with him. So thank you. So I want to say just a few things about Bob here. In November of 2004, he was hired as public safety telecommunication technician. And in 2007, he promoted to telecommunications supervisor. And then 2010, our telecom manager resigned, so he assumed those additional functions. And then in 2017, he was promoted to telecom manager. So he has quite a career with us. Certain awards and recognitions I'd like to note. In 2010, he was Telecommunication Employee of the Year, included telecom and dispatch staff. That was when we were doing our own internal dispatch. In 2014, he had a unit citation for outstanding performance during the slide fire here in our fire district. And in 2015, he received the Customer Service Award recipient for that year. So we appreciate Bob and his hard work managing our IT, which is critical to our survival. And so again, just if anyone would like to, with me, congratulate Bob on his 15 years of service. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you so much, sir. Anybody? No hands?
But Chief, if I may, just for a quick minute here, Bob, on behalf of the whole board here, it's truly an honor to work with a fellow like you to keep things together, especially the importance with the firefighters on the ground, the IT for how we operate and keep things flowing. Sometimes you're not in the limelight, but when you are, things are pretty serious. So I do appreciate all the work that you do and keep up the good work along with your staff also. So thank you guys.
All right. And Bob, I'd like to say, IT doesn't always say what it's about. You keep our communication system working so that when calls come in, they get dispatched and we're able to respond. So you keep those towers going. I understand at times you drive in the thick snow to go fix something, climbing up a tower, and it's that kind of work besides your expertise in IT that we're grateful for. So thank you very much for your years of service.
Anyone else?
May I just say a couple? Can you hear me? Okay.
Sure.
So Bob, thank you for everything that you've always done for us. You are indispensable. Wait. Thank you. Indispensable. We need you. We're so glad that we have you, and we hope to have you for another 15, 20 years, maybe. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Gene or Al?
I was just going to say, if you're responsible for that cell tower being in Oak Creek Canyon, thank you.
Okay, I'm sure Gene would have something.
What they said.
Yeah, you go. Again, thanks, Bob, for all you've done. Okay. With that said, our next item of business here in our regular business meeting is our public forum. No request for speaking? Okay. Therefore, there's no response to public comments. Next item on the agenda is our consent agenda, which consists of our regular meeting minutes. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next up on the agenda is our financial report and updates with our finance director, Mr. Gabe Boldra.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. You have the October financial report in your packet. And once the computer catches up with me, I'll present it. Okay.
And scene.
See, where's the IT guys now, huh?
Yeah.
Snap.
There we go. Okay, there we go. So starting off with our tax levy revenue for the month, we received just over 5.9 million in property tax revenue. You'll see for the month that's a million over what we projected. When we get to year to date, you'll see we're well ahead of our historical averages on collections with this October collection that we did see. On the non-levy revenue, we're just under 300,000 in non-levy revenues, which was over budget by 89,000. Most of our categories were in line with budget, with the exception of our non-district fires. We saw 128,000 where we, had a projected amount of 8,000. We kept it very low. And speaking with the chiefs next year, we're really going to kind of dive into our wildland and build in a larger budget component of that. So it'll be a little different come next year. On the expense side, our total expenses for the month were $1,197,000. We were under budget by $181,000. If you look across the major categories on the presentation, you can see we were under budget by all of our major categories with the exception of our managerial expenses. And that was over by $6,000, and that's related to our direct costs related to wildland deployments. So that's why we see that variance there. From a year-to-date standpoint, our total revenues are at 7.6 million, which is just right about 1.5 million over budget from where we expect to be at this point in the year. As I mentioned on property tax revenue before, that's actually ahead by 800,000. So again, remember on property tax revenue, it's just a timing. It's a factor of timing. Doesn't mean we're going to see 800,000 more in property tax revenue for the year, which would be nice, but that's not what it means. But then our non-levy revenues are ahead by $600,000. And so that is realized additional revenue that we'll see. And that's really broken up between two categories. One is, again, our non-district fires, where we've actually built out 400,000 year to date on our non-district fires. And then the other thing is on AMBO. AMBO revenue is at 800,000, which is actually 150,000 over where we've budgeted year to date for the fiscal year. On the expense side, our total expenses for the year are $5,157,000 year to date, which is 560,000 under budget. Again, all major categories are reporting under budget. Personnel, I will point out, is a little skewed due to an audit adjustment. Our first pay period that actually hit in this budget year was actually accrued for the prior year. So it'll end up washing out when we get to the end of this year and make that the same accrual at the end of this fiscal year. But that's kind of throwing us off a little bit on that number. But again, it'll catch up when we hit year end. Going on to our percentage of budget, at this point, we've expended 32% of our budget with 68% remaining for the rest of the fiscal year. Percentage of expenses, personnel coming in at 84%, operations at 8%, communications at 5%, and managerial at 3%. Again, with the understanding our personnel expenses are still higher as a percentage, one, because of wildland deployments, but two, also, as we kind of looked at all the other categories, there's not a lot of other spending going on. I do anticipate we will start to see that pick up now that first half taxes have come in. As much as I try to explain to everybody, you don't have to dictate your spending based on when we get taxes. That's still what everybody is trained on, and that's kind of the nature of everybody. So we always kind of wait for that first half of taxes to come in.
So again, as we look at this particular slide, even though personnel says 84, it's 84 because of the other lack of spending and the other.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And 84 is not bad. I'm not. Yeah, we're not in bad shape at all. It's just why we're seeing a little higher.
I think that's kind of average, though, if you really look at it.
Right. Moving on, and finally, kind of year over year, we ended the month at 10.6 million in total cash compared to 7.8 the prior year. Now that we do have first half taxes, one thing I am going to do though is we are going to create that segregated account for the end leave liability and fund that with the 250,000. And then the other thing is we've got about $400,000 sitting in our capital, but really that should be 3.4 million. So we're going to move 3 million out of the general into our capital fund and then have that designation. Now that we've got plenty of cash in our general fund, so we don't have to worry about moving money or borrowing on line of credit, which we won't need to do at all. But
Can you just repeat that real quick? I'm sorry. So you said we're moving,
so we're going to move 250 into a segregated account for our end leave liability.
right.
And then we have 400,000 sitting right now in our segregated capital fund, but
Oh,
that
okay.
balance should be at 3.4 million.
Okay.
So we're going to move the 3 million over there as well.
Okay.
And the reason we didn't do it earlier in the fiscal year is so if we draw down on our general fund balance, that way we don't have to then transfer funds
Right.
or, borrow on the line of credit, which we wouldn't
Yeah,
do if we had
no.
the money sitting in the bank. So
Okay.
that's why.
I just got turned around. I thought it was the opposite. I was like, what is happening?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Can I ask one more question?
Yes.
So on the ambulance revenue, so it's up by 100,000. Is that due to collections or is that due to more calls?
So it's hard to analyze that at this point right now because we're looking at a cash basis collection. So that's what we've received. A lot of that I think has been due to catching up on billing and stuff. So once we're kind of more in a regular cyclical cycle, we can really see, are we collecting better per dollar?
Right.
Or is it a volume thing? I do know volume is up some, but really at this point we're seeing just that the volume of billing on the catch up on the
Okay.
cycling.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. With that, the only other thing I just want to add to the board is we did have Walker Armstrong here 2 weeks ago. They've completed the field work, and so we're kind of working on the CAFR report, which is the full comprehensive annual financial report, while they're working on the actual audited financials, and then we'll combine all of that and probably have a final presentation to the board probably in the January or February timeframe on the full audit. So,
Okay.
thank you.
With that said, do I have a motion to approve? Oh, yes.
Yes.
Oh, actually, one other thing. Chief and I did fix the timing on our iPad and laptop to not turn off on us so quickly. So we did get that done today as well.
Show me how to do that, will you? I'm constantly touching mine. Okay. All right. So, based on that presentation, do I have a motion to approve the October 2019 financial report?
I move to approve the October 2019 financial report.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the October 2019 financial report is approved. The next item up is the discussion presentation, Certificate of Achievement of Excellence in Financial Reporting from the Government Finance Officers Association.
Fancy.
And Gabe, is that your presentation or the chief's?
Probably combination. but
Okay.
Yeah. So, we wanted to formally let the board know that was it last week or we had a verbal that we were receiving the award, but I wanted to wait until we got the official notification via mail. And so we did last week got official notification that our CAFR that we prepared for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2018 was evaluated by the Government Finance Officers Association, and we received an award for excellence in financial reporting. So it just kind of gives the district an extra little accolade on the transparency and ability to present the financials. And although it doesn't go into a deep analysis of the management, it does look at how the organization is doing financially. And if there are, adverse opinions from the audit or negative transactions that cause kind of an adverse outlook for the organization, it affects the ability to receive the award. So I think it's a good thing that the district, prepares the CAFR. And even better to have somebody recognize the work. So,
I applaud you and us.
Yes.
thank you.
Good job.
Yeah, and that would be what I would add as a fire chief, is thank you to Gabe, to JVG, and also our staff, because it's really been a teamwork to get us to that level. And it's not, we're not hitting the minimum. We're actually going beyond what the requirements would be. And so I think how we manage our finances, I think that's a very, very good direction we're going. And we are transparent and open. And again, thank you, Gabe, your team, our team. I think that teamwork it was a great success.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%, Chief. And I'd like to add that, a couple months ago, I did question the CAF report with you on a sidebar type of thing. And it truly is a mile marker for any district to try and achieve. And my question to you is how big is this certifying government agency? I mean, is it like the largest in the state? Every state has, or the nation?
So the GFOA is a national organization that pretty much dictates is an association for all government finance officers across the country, and so it's.
Isn't that North America?
Yeah.
I mean,
Um,
I'm sorry.
Not
Well,
North.
Canada as well.
I think Canada. I think Canada was mentioned in this.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I just wanted to make
Yeah.
make it a point to those people in Sedona who view this video or aware of what a remarkable achievement this really is.
Yeah, it's huge.
And for you to come and present to us and to answer any question that we have at any time, and to be involved with an auditing agency as we do, and I've been on it a couple times. I don't know who the latest board member was. It makes me feel good knowing that we are as transparent as we are, and that anybody can see. It's clearly we can see that. So, with that said, is there anybody else who'd like to say anything? Well, Gabe, thank you very much, and the chief also.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's awesome.
And I could assume that next month would be more of a formal presentation of this, or is this going to be it? I
This
mean,
is-
with the certificate and all
This
that.
is the certificate, yeah, so this is pretty much it. We'll get a plaque, we'll
Okay.
put up in the office.
Okay,
But I think, yeah, unless anybody has any other ideas for presentation, that's pretty much it.
Well, again, thank you very much, and your staff also. Thank you. Okay. Next item. Next item that I have here is the fire chief's report. Chief Troutwine.
Thank you, sir. And the first thing we'll look at, just to get our overview again, is our 2019 incident summary. So when we look at our call volume year-to-date for 2019, we're at 3,738 responses. And then year-to-date in 2018, it was 3,761 responses. So we're trending about consistent with last year. Looking at October specifically, we had 10 rescue responses, 249 EMS, 4 fire, 99 service calls, and then off-district 9. So, and you can see, when you look across the year, we're having some pretty consistent calls each month with the different types. And then again, we're trending about like last year right now. So our graph here, when we talk about being in the 90th percentile, our total reflex breakout time, or really total response time. So I want to note just a couple things, because what we want to do when we look at this is continue to keep at a more high level. I want to make a couple comments here about that in a minute. But looking at our 2019 response time, total response time in the 90th percentile, we're at about 10 minutes, 11 seconds. And then the 90th percentile total response time in 2018 year to date was 10 minutes, 46 seconds. So if you look in the entirety of the year, it's pretty consistent. It bounces around, but in terms of coming down a little bit on our total response time, we're working at achieving that. A couple things I want to say on the call processing time, which is the bottom of the graph there. So that would be when someone calls 911, and it goes to what we call the PSAP, or the Public Safety Answering Point. So my understanding, we have 3 Public Safety Answering Points, or PSAPs, in our fire district. Yavapai County, Coconino County, and then Sedona Police Department. So when someone calls 911 in our district, typically it'll go to one of those 3 PSAPs. And then when that dispatcher determines if it's a fire EMS type incident, then they push it to our alarm down in Cottonwood. So when you look at those times, one of the things that we're trying to look at is how accurate that is. And of course, we're working with 3 different PSAPs, and and working with our alarm. That in conjunction with the turnout time, we've talked a lot about turnout time, what the NFPA standard is, but again, some of the things we're looking at is those two particular parts of this total response time, how accurate are they? Now, let me make a comment on that. Right now, with our communications, our dispatch, we're on a verbal type acknowledgement. In other words, we get dispatched, and then you have to verbally go en route, verbally go on scene, and then you have a dispatcher that would input that, when they hear you go on scene. So when you look at systems and technology that are more automatic, which is what our goal would be to work towards. For example, you could, in some systems, when you look at the turnout time, you look at that en route time, there's GPS in the vehicle that when you pass the threshold of the station, it puts the rig en route. So that, with that technology, as long as your connectivity's good and it's all working properly, that's about as accurate as you really could get on your turnout time. Because you get a clear dispatch time in the computer, then you get a clear en route time. Now, the only reason I'm bringing that up again is I think this graph is good, again, to look at each component of a total response time. It's good to look at our trends. So over time, what we are doing is when it comes to our call processing, our turnout time, and then also as we train when it comes to response, how we handle emergency vehicles safely, we're consistently and constantly training our firefighters. We've just done quite a bit of engineer training for upcoming engineer exam. So that's one of the things we're reinforced, how to handle emergency vehicles properly when you're responding. So over time, the goal would be to improve our technology to the point where when we look at that data, we know it's really accurate because of the automaticity of the system. So just that's a note. But again, I think this, again, is a good thing to look at for trends and general overview. The next slide, again, looks at our average response time, not 90th percentile. And just looking at the year-to-date, in 2019, it's around 649, and in 2018, at year-to-date is about 714. So again, that's dropped a little bit when you look at the overall average response time year-to-date. The next slide, again, characterizes our calls, our call volume per station. You can see Station 1 and Station 3, their total calls for the month trended pretty close. And then Station 4 would be next up, then Station 6, Station 5. And again, we have the one part of the graph reflects the toll responses, and then the other were calls that company would go out of first due area, but those aren't additional calls. Again, they're that number. For example, Station 1, there are 249 total calls in October, and of those 249 total calls, 159 of them were out of first due district. So it just shows again how all 5 stations support each other when it comes to our responses, and that's what happens. If you're on a call, the next unit's up. So again, it's a good reflection of that. So I'd like to turn now the microphone over to Chief Coyle in terms of our operations.
So it was, thought I turned it on. I think I must have turned it off. So the operational activities in the month of October, well, all the way up until just a couple weeks ago, focused primarily on backcountry rescues, MVAs, and then EMS calls. There was a couple significant. There was a car versus pedestrian MVA that I think was one of the ones that the crews demonstrated the real impact of their training and everything on being able to quickly get the patient triaged and transported and to definitive care. There's also some backcountry rescues that involve short haul, but I don't want to say, I'm hesitant to say it was just an average month, because it was, as far as there's no like significant sentinel moments, if you will, in call response, but the crews are busy and crews were responding to a lot of those the calls that we tend to respond to. The one difference for this last month than previous months of reporting was that we sent an engine and one overhead individual to California to bolster their response. Both the engine and the crew are back. Actually, tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, we're sending people up to look at the Type 3 engine that we purchased, that y'all authorized for purchase some months ago, to do the final on that, which will be exciting to get that back to the district and prepare for our upcoming season. It looks like California had some critical weather yesterday, but now today they're actually starting to get rain too. So hopefully, we're seeing the end of the fire season for 2019. And the last thing about the GIS position recruitment, I'm confident that by next board meeting we should have something concrete to you as far as an individual in that position. And yeah, that's
Does that mean
it.
it's been narrowed down to an individual?
Employment
Very
that's
good.
pending backgrounds and the other necessary paperwork before we make it official.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I'm excited about it actually. So
Chief, if I may, the Type 3 apparatus we're about to receive, is it going to be trailered down or is it going to be driven down from wherever it's being built from?
they're bringing it to us. Normally they'll drive them, and just to make sure that there's any, they get to shake the the rattles out of it. What do they call it in a boat with the shakedown? Yeah, there you go. Doing the shakedown trip down there and then they'll correct it before they hand it over to us. That's customarily the way it's done.
Gotcha.
So,
Thank you.
all right. I think there's one other thing we'll talk about in the grants, but Cat Mohade and I have been working with Motorola and with Telecom about getting the radios that we need for the grant. I suspect that by next month we should have January at the latest, have a PO to y'all for a very large amount, the majority of which will be grant funded to get new portable radios. But right now we're looking at the SCBAs that the next generation SCBA is not the one we have right now, the breathing apparatus, but that have what they call near field Bluetooth. So you don't have to have a wire connection into the audio on the SCBAs. And we're practicing that with our new radios. Yeah, for anyone that's ever been in on air in a structure fire, the ability to hear well has been something that we've been chasing forever. And some of the near field Bluetooth, being able to have that in there, not have something else to get caught, is exciting. So right now we're just making sure that what we had vetted through the rest of the process as a good radio system, that it accomplishes that future need as well, since we intend on having these for quite some time once we make the purchase. So that was my little stall for you there, Chief. So there you go.
Great. Any other questions for Chief Coyle? Thank you, Chief Coyle. So I'd like to move to community risk reduction and have our Fire Marshal John Davis report out.
Thank you, Chief. As you can see under our community risk reduction activities, pretty typical month in most cases. However, there's a couple stand out here. Our plans reviews, we did 69 last month. The previous highest month was 52.
Wow.
So it was a huge increase in plan reviews last month. The engine company inspections, what we figured out was the engine companies are doing the inspections and they're going into the GIS program. Unfortunately, without a GIS tech, we're not able to get them out of there. So they're sitting there.
Okay.
So hopefully, when we get the new GIS person on board, we'll be able to get those numbers back in order. It's not just as simple as an Excel spreadsheet. I mean, that's the format that they end up in, but there are multiple steps in the GIS software that are above my head, is what I'm telling you. So once we get the GIS tech back, we'll be able to harvest those numbers and get a better idea for you. We had a couple of fire investigations last month. The first one was out at the gun range. There was a fire in a piece of operating equipment. They were drilling a well out there, and there was some malfunction in the equipment that caused the fire. And we also had a structure fire out on Soldiers Trail Road, or excuse me, Soldiers Trail. It was in an exterior barbecue out on a deck, and it was determined to be an improper installation of the barbecue. You can see we had many fire prevention activities. Most of those were in conjunction with Fire Prevention Month, but there were quite a few of those going on, so we had a lot of contact with the public in conjunction with Fire Prevention Month. My safety message this month, I was doing some research for an upcoming class that I'm attending, and So I got onto the subject of fall prevention, and I'm not talking about preventing November. I'm talking about slips and trips. So falls are the leading cause of fatal and non-fatal injuries in people over 65. Some steps that we can take. We all have loved ones who are elderly, and so we can kind of take some steps to help them avoid falls. First is to make sure that they have annual eye exams. If they can't see the hazard, they can't avoid it. Clean up clutter around the house. Help them tidy up the house. Repair or remove trip hazards such as loose carpeting or loose floorboards. Lighting is extremely important throughout the house, but especially at the tops and bottoms of stairs and in the bedroom. Make sure lighting is readily available in case they have to get up in the middle of the night. Make sure the stairs have secure railing, and install grab bars and handles in the tower and near the tower. Can't even speak. Near the tub and shower, and near the commode as well. That's my safety message. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions for community risk reduction?
Just a point, John, I was pleasantly surprised and pleased to see the social media message with fire prevention this period. And then to see here, it's reflected at 76, which is a huge difference from the previous month, which was one, I think it reported.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that was different. Those are the just fire inspections that we did out of the office.
Oh, okay.
The engine company inspections are still waiting.
Still waiting.
The ones that we do and put in Firehouse, we can get that data out
Gotcha.
easily.
Okay.
So
Well, the fact that that message went out and the guys are out there doing it, the crews are doing it, is huge. And I think the public's going to be the benefactors from that.
well, that credit for that post goes to the battalion chief. That was a post that was put out, I think, by Chief Lukowski, wasn't it?
Was.
Yeah.
Well, our thanks to him.
Yeah.
But all the guys, everybody,
Sure.
guys and gals, everybody who's involved with that, it was good. It was a good message.
I have a curiosity. The advent of all the short-term rentals, does that involve inspections at all? Or do we have the opportunity to see if there's issues that could be addressed by an inspection?
That would occasionally we get called by an owner or a resident that has concerns, but at last count there were over 1,100 of those just visible on VRBO and Airbnb. So at this point in time, we're not targeting those. There are some questions about how they're classified, I guess. My interpretation and talking with building officials, they're not quite so, they don't necessarily share my interpretation of how they're classified. But when I look at the fire code, it talks about R1 occupancies, so the same as hotels and motels. Once you reach a threshold of more than 10 occupants. So I would like to see that any place that has more than 10 occupants, to me, is classified as an R1 occupancy. And they were originally issued a certificate of occupancy as an R3, a 1 and 2 family dwelling.
Right.
So to me, that is a change of occupancy. And anytime an occupancy changes classifications, you're required to bring it up to the current code. Current code for R1 occupancies, hotels and motels, requires sprinkler systems, alarm systems, and all of those things. So we're still working on that and how that falls into the state law and all that. But as you can see, there's 1,100 additional occupancies in addition to the already approximately 3,800 occupancies that we count as part of our.
What brings it to my attention is a friend of mine who lives in Uptown knows of a property where the house has been remodeled to house as many as 22 people. And I was just wondering what happens under that condition.
Well, and the problem is like I said, they're we aren't necessarily notified of that for a typical, just a home remodel. There's nothing that comes to us for a plan review. So when they do those remodels, we don't know that they've been upgraded. But we have successfully dealt with a couple that have come to our attention in the recent past where we have gone to the owners and said, look, this is my definition, this is my interpretation. You are now an R1 occupancy. My advice to you would be either limit your the number of occupants to 10 or fewer, or you need to bring it up to the current code requirements for an R1 occupancy. And in both cases, they have elected to bring it up to the requirements for an R1 occupancy.
Wow.
Interesting.
So if somebody were to challenge that, I don't know how that would stand, but I'm pretty confident in my interpretation. The problem is these come in and out of being all the time, and we're not necessarily notified of them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, Chief.
Great, thank you, Chief Davis. So Chief Mazulis, he will report out on training in EMS.
I can read it. No, I can read it fine. I'm teasing. Quite a bit of training this month. Training classes 117 and attendees at just under 700. And that includes our online training modules and things like that. So for that to make a little bit more sense. We hosted the Reducing Wildfire Risk in the Home Ignition Zone class, and Board Member Moore attended that event. From an insider, do you have anything you'd like to say about the class?
Yeah, the class was really informative, and I was very surprised to see how many landscapers showed up, as well as members of HOAs boards. So it was good to see these people coming out, and it was nice to spend that full 2 days getting all that education, and then winding up being a FireWise assessor, because I feel that it really, like, if I can do it, you know, everybody could do it. So if we would have the opportunity to have more of those classes around, or more people that are perhaps retired and willing to do these FireWise assessments of homes and properties, we could save a lot of property and lives. So I just know that I really enjoyed it. I love learning, and it was well done, and I would do it again.
That's good to hear, because we got feedback from our folks as well, and everybody seemed to enjoy the class,
Yeah.
and I think we will host one again.
That would be great.
I would like to host one annually.
Yeah, I think that would be fantastic.
And then we're finishing up our inaugural Engineers Academy, and the Chief spoke to it. We're putting together a more formal process that prepares our folks, because we have a book they fill out, a task book of requirements, and then some class work and a written test before they can operate our equipment. And this is just an additional piece of that. And this was our inaugural run, and it went really well. We had some tenured captains and engineers put it together, and we have got some takeaways from that. We're going to keep modifying it and making it better for our folks. And we had the L580 class. I think that was Sean Foster that attended that, if I'm not mistaken. And it's a big leadership class. It's a good deal. It's part of the Wildland NWCG class structure, which is National Wildfire Coordinating Group, and it's what we use as a guideline for our wildland training. It's also what the state of Arizona uses as benchmarks to certify us to go out and do the wildfires. So it's important stuff. Continued with our firehouse training. Our tech engineer, Brian Espial, did a really good job of, the intent was to just better explain to our company officers what data, garbage in, garbage out philosophies on data entry, and what and how to write our reports better, so that we have improved usage of our software. And then human resource continued with OSHA and work comp and FMLA goodness, all the legal, federal, and state requirements to keep us alive. And EMS activities really, was our crews getting out there, and really good responses, really good feedback from the public. Next month we'll have a lot more to report. We hit a lot of heavy training earlier this month, and we're rolling out some new equipment I'll report on next month, but all is going well.
Social media, again, with regard to EMS and backcountry rescues and so on, I stay abreast of, I'm a Facebook aficionado. And we're there every day, and all of the folks, both internally and those on the outside of the department that have added to the Facebook presentation for SFD, you're right out there. So people are learning more and more about Sedona Fire District and the people that staff it. Thank you.
Thank you.
More than ever.
Anybody else? Okay. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Chief. And now we'll turn it over to our Director of Administrative Services, Heidi Robinson.
Hello. All right, so I'm going to report on a few recent events. Mostly they're just updates on what the upcoming events were last month. So Chief Troutwine was able to hang the firefighter flag for First Responders Day. So you might have seen the flags go up, and participated in the welcome dinner for that as well. The support for First Responders Day hosted by the Marine Corps in town and the Elks Club. And so that was a delightful way to honor our first responders and to be a part of that. We did, of course, have Halloween in Uptown on Halloween, October 31st. And we once again did our haunted ambulance. We saw a couple people out there. It was a lot of fun. And so it seems to be a big hit. We're going to continue with that and just trying to get glow sticks, safety message out there, let them see us face-to-face and in person, and get the kids to kind of be comfortable with the equipment and whatnot, so that they're not just seeing it in an emergency, they're seeing it actively. So I think the parents, though, do get a bigger kick out of it than most anybody else. We are in, as many of you seem to be aware, in the middle of No Shave November, which is looking at the beardage and mustachery around the table. Making up words, it's good. It's a real word.
Well, I shaved yesterday, sorry.
Then we appreciate that. So just bringing to light a little bit of a focus on men's health. So take care of checking your things and getting appointments, looking for that cancer awareness of all kinds, and just bringing it about. It's about the men this month. Last month it was about the ladies, and so here we are again. So it looks like Jean might be winning in new growth. I don't know.
Oh, please.
Gotta know when to hold 'em.
Although Ed's working on her for the regulation, regulation mustache going on. So we'll post a few updates as we get a little closer, and we hope to see some good winners for our group there. There was a couple, or at least one other recent event that we didn't have on the calendar or on the slide, but just Ed and I did speak at the Sedona Women's Club, and they'd reached out to Ed, asked him if he could talk about some emergency preparedness and things that the fire district does to be prepared all the time. Particularly, their emphasis was on fire evacuation in the case of a wildland fire in our area. And Ed did a wonderful job of showing how we prepare for all things all the time. So it's not just that's a focus or that's even a concern here, but it's something that we want to always be ready for. And then we had the distinct pleasure or maybe displeasure of actually having an emergency incident at the event. So we were able to have a full crew come in and help a member, and then talk about that, and talk about the preparedness, and talk about if you see something, say something. We were able to really get care to their member immediately. And so it really drove that message home about being ready and about being aware of your surroundings. And while it didn't apply to wildfire at that time or any other kind, it was a medical emergency that we were able to swiftly help. We understand she's doing very well in full recovery. So we thank them for inviting us, and we'd love to do those things. We've done several small meetings Many of the chiefs have gone out to do that and just trying to get those messages out. So we're trying to get those things on the calendar. We look forward to any invitation to go do that. Upcoming events, really the really big upcoming event that we have, since there's so many holiday and family things that are approaching. We're just looking forward to January, where the Arizona Fire Districts Association Winter Conference is coming up. So mid-January, board members, if you are interested in attending, if you have not already, reach out to Carrie, and she will be your link to get you registered, help you arrange travel, and so forth. We did receive an in-kind donation of $130 from a citizen, and we are always very grateful when we receive those. We generally put those into a general fund. Sometimes there is explained what they'd like us to do with that donation, and we try to honor that when it's appropriate. Other times we will just put it into kind of the general fund of supporting the district, so and our members. So we'd love to see that. It shows usually with a thank you note that they're very grateful for some kind of kindness, and that's my report. We don't have anything much new in administration to report at this time.
That was great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
No questions?
What's the date for the conference?
The 16th through the 18th.
Gotcha, okay.
Okay.
Thank you. And thanks for your report.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Heidi. And in terms of events, I wanted to plug one right now. I know we'll report out on it next month because it's in November. But this Saturday, we have our Toys for Tot.
Oh,
So our firefighters will be out, and some of the staff will be out at the Safeway in West Sedona, and then the Clark department store down in the village. So please come out. 8 in the morning to 2. Is that correct, Heidi? Yep. So and all the stations, of course, are collection points for toys, and we'll collect those and participate in that Toys for Tots. It's a really great event. So I know we'll report out on how well it went next month, but just so you know, if you come out in one of those stores Saturday, you'll see us.
That seems earlier than I'm used to that happening.
Yeah,
but here
do we?
Typically, it happens after Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And I think the only explanation I have that I think it could be, and I don't know this for sure because it's coordinated by the Toys for Tots group in town, but it is a shorter period of time between Thanksgiving and Christmas this season. So they have to bring the toys to be distributed on the 12th. I think they get distributed on the 16th. So all collecting has to be done by the 12th. So in order for us to get that all pulled together, sent to their facility, and ready to be transported, we need to bump it up just a little bit. But it'll get us in the holiday giving spirit a little bit sooner. So we're glad to do it.
And then almost everybody gets a pen, Toys for Tots.
We'll try to find
Still
those.
have it.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Heidi.
When you donate.
So to finish off the chief report, there's a few more items I want to cover. One is our graph there on our strategic plan overview. So, of course, staff is getting more familiar and comfortable with our Invisio software, where you have to go in and talk about your actions and look at your strategies and continue to work on that plan. So we are refining that, working on it. This graph overall summary, again, you can see the status pendings, 23%, on track, 42.7, some disruptions, 7%, major disruption, 3, upcoming, meaning upcoming work to be done, 7%, completed, 14. So the overall progress is about 33%, but I think there were maybe 19 or 20 items. Does that sound right, Chief Coyle? Goals? Yeah.
That's correct, Chief. There's 19 goals.
So as we get more familiar with our software and we're working our action items on those, we're refining the action items. We're making sure we have some really clear objectives, and quite a number of those goals are actually accomplished. So when we get caught up in our Visio software, that will be reflective. But again, I think in terms of using this software and getting staff moving in a forward direction on our strategic plan, I think we've had some pretty good progress. And I think it's only going to continue to improve, and some really good leadership by Chief Coyle and all staff on that. Couple of highlights on Station 4, and I think we mentioned this last month, we're still having legal walk down the assessment on all the easements. That's a more complex property than it appears from driving by or visiting it. So, but what we do want to do is, from the legal aspect with those easements and all those issues, is have really clear mapping and really clear legal documents that define that very clearly. Because again, of course, the design and the plan will be based on that, and the direction we give to the utilities and everyone else who has a little, vested interest in that property. So we're still walking down those legal aspects. And then December 12th, Chief Coyle has a meeting coming up with Wilmeg Construction, which he'll have a discussion with them on some potential designs based on the footprint of the property and how it sits. So that'll be good, just another good step on figuring out designs and what that looks like. So ultimately, of course, we can walk down our defined plan and the cost, so we make sure we're operating with all our parameters, and we have our checkbook and ready to go, and our pocket change. We'll probably use a little of that, but we'll have that all lined up. So again, it's slow progress, but again, I think to get it going, the legal aspects of that property, we need to make sure we have completely defined, and we're working on that. And then as we walk down design, I think we'll be able to come up with a pretty good functional design for that property, and so we're continuing to move forward.
In terms of that particular architectural company, is that correct, Chief Coyle, that's doing preliminary?
No, ma'am, it's
What is
they're a construction company, and so
Okay.
we're gonna the intent of that meeting on the 12th, the chief said, is to just kind of be able to better define which direction we want to go. And so they're going to take me to 4 different stations that they've recently built by 4 different architects, including an architect that did Station 6. I had some conversations with them about what I thought was important to see in a station at that location versus Station 6 location, and ways that we could gain efficiencies and reduce costs, just things like, there are quite a few different things. And so then once we kind of, once I work with the chief on the information I received there, and we kind of refine that relationship, then this is still all pre-construction stuff. So then with at least with Wilmeg Construction and potentially with an architect, then we would work to get to a place where we could bid a set of plans. And then that would be the point at which we would get the architect. And then we don't have to use Wilmeg if we decide we don't want to.
Okay.
We can go with any other construction company that time as we bid it out. But that'll get us to where we've got the most accurate bid possible, so we don't get a number that is inconsistent with reality. And because that's kind of where it's at. It's man, there's so much stuff in the ground, like the chief said there. I just really want to make sure that we don't mess up and just arbitrarily say we're going to put it right here,
Blue
and then
state.
find out that we can't.
I think there's also things in the ground that we don't know about.
I am certain there is,
Yeah.
just given all the different purposes that facility and that annex has served. I am certain there is.
Yeah.
So we will do our best to reduce uncertainty, acknowledging that we will have to react to uncertainty when we start breaking ground.
Very good. Thank you.
Chief, do you anticipate the easement issues will affect the ability for a rear entry station?
They may, but I don't think they will. Only because we're looking at where at least the easements that Mr. Woody and I have looked at already, not knowing what other ones may be out there. But that's the intent of defining all those ahead of time, is so we can look at what station locations would accommodate drive-through bays and work within the constraints that any of the easements post conversations with whoever they're with, as far as any modifications, adjustments we could make, may put on us as far as where our building can go.
Sure. Thank you.
I know that was kind of wishy-washy, but that's as good as it is right now.
At this point in time,
Yes, sir.
that's what we know.
Yep.
I just have one last question. So in regards to it's Wilmeg Construction?
Yes, ma'am. It's
So
Wilmeg.
we didn't have to go through an RFP process to choose them for this situation?
No, not for the it's a professional services, right?
Okay.
Gabe?
Oh,
That's-
gotcha, okay.
Yeah, so, and again, we're not anchored into them.
Mhm. Right,
I looked at some of the stations that they had built, and they had done a lot of stuff where they just had a couple, like, different colored concrete block, not split face, but regular block, that where they made things look clean, but without a lot of what I'd call gingerbread that cost a lot of money. And so they had a good mind for that when I was talking to them. So it seemed like that was a good person to enter into that conversation with, looking for an architect, again, for a station at this location that's off of the main path and everything, that we could get it where it's aesthetically pleasing, but in a manner that's not as costly as it could be with more gingerbread.
well, as far as I'm concerned though, as a board member, aesthetically pleasing is great and it's important, but I want to know that the guts of that station are gonna serve our first responders as best as possible, so we can obviously roll out quickly, take care of their needs, have those, washers and dryers that, for their turnouts, so we don't have issues with cancer in the future and so forth. So everything inside, to me, is the most important,
And
even
the-
though I'm a realtor, but it's
No,
inside.
I can appreciate that. And the chief made it clear to me too, though, as I was looking at this, to make sure that I have a 50-year look at this as far as the capacity.
Okay,
And we also, the stations that we'll take you to, one of them is a completely clean station, and then there's other ones where they've engaged in different levels of those actions for presenting that cross contamination into the living quarters.
right.
Because there's you add a lot of size and a lot of cost when you go with this completely clean option. It's not
Yeah.
really proven yet, but there are certainly steps that we could take. And so the idea will be to find that kind of breakover point where we've done as much as is appropriate for us to do, to reduce the spread of carcinogens,
Yes,
within the cost constraints.
okay,
And then, I have another
thank you.
question. Given the potential encumbrances that this building has between the easements and size, and maybe impairing our ability to do a drive-in from the rear, are we also taking a look at other locations?
We had looked at one other location
Uh-huh.
with, so, the thing about our location is that we have our tower there. And it's,
Yeah.
when you're looking at the red rocks, nobody likes to see a tower. I think in a lot of ways, our tower being there is just kind of a foregone conclusion now. If we chose to relocate, and that meant relocating the tower, I think that would be met with significant controversy. So what we have looked at is, we own the parking lot up above as well. So that piece of property is being incorporated in the design, and there was one other piece of property that we were looking at that if we used it and we left our tower there, I feel like we did our due diligence to research that, and it's not viable. And so right now, what the emphasis is knowing that we have that parking ability up above, knowing that we have zero setbacks on the piece of property. If we, how can we, the first goal will be to accomplish the drive-through bays and meet the turning radiuses and everything with the piece of property we have right there. And I'll come back to the chief, and I'm sure he'll come to you all. If at some point I think, hey, for what we say we need to have, I don't know that we can do it at this place. Or if we do it here, it's going to be, $5 million more than it would be if we do it on a flat piece of ground someplace else. And then we kind of have that conversation.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's a lot of good input. Any other points? Thank you, Chief.
You're very welcome.
This last month, we did not have any purchase orders over $10,000. And in terms of grant activity, just note that the one grant that we did apply there with the Indian community, there was a verbal decline. So we did get one with the ACCHIN, which you'll see was one of our unmanned aerial system program. That was for the SUAS. So public outreach, our social media, just to report out on some of those numbers. We had, in terms of our new page likes, we had 229. That's up 2% for this last month. Our post reach was 46,259. That was down 30%. I just remember some of that's driven by if something happens, right? significant fire rescue, then people really are interested. Our new page followers, 238, so that was down 3%. And, you know, that could also be we're kind of in the off tourism season, right? I know we're seeing 3 to 4 million tourists, and I don't know, my short time here, I haven't really seen an off season, but off season is meaning you actually can drive through uptown without a delay, I guess. So, but that could be potentially, again, just the ebb and flow. But we've all acknowledged, and I think it's been a very effective mechanism to communicate our social media platform there. And, you know, I've been getting out on all these events, you know, and all the weekend, and I often have very positive input from the community on that site and things we're posting. So I think that's very good. The most engagement we had was our crews that we sent to California on the wildfires. As Chief Coyle mentioned, we had a Type 6 engine with 4 personnel, and then we had our overhead officer that was sent out to California. So we had 19,500 reached, 3.4 thousand post clicks, and then 1.5 thousand reactions, likes, shares, etc. So, you know, that caused some, of course, there's a lot of media coverage in California, but Arizona and the Sedona Fire District really stepped up to make sure we could help, you know, our brothers and sisters there. And I'm sure if we need it next season, and I'm referring to next season, hoping the rains come, they'll be out here too. So. So the last thing I had here, unless there's any comments or questions, was just there was some really nice thank you letters and correspondence, and I won't necessarily read them all. We will report out next month on the fire we had at Sedona Winds, which is one of our larger assisted living complexes. And if when you read that, and then you'll get a little more information next month, you understand that I think, you know, between ourselves and law enforcement and their staff, the outcome was a lot better, I think, because of quick reaction and good response. So that was a very nice letter to receive from them. We definitely appreciated their staff and how they worked, and also the response from law enforcement. And I liked a lot of these too. There's a thank you here from our firefighters going to California on the wildland deployment. We had a 2-year-old in a family that loves fire trucks, and a crew paused and took time to kind of, you know, share with that family and him. And, you know, I'll tell you what, that makes a huge impact on the family, which you can see from when you read it. But also, who knows, that 2-year-old may be the Sedona Fire District fire chief one day. I don't know. We'll see. Hopefully we'll all be in a retirement mode that far down the road, but
Sedona wins.
we don't know. Yeah. We'll reflect on that at the Sedona Winds. So, and another one was regarding EMS response and how quickly, and I think another one was a rescue. So real kind of diversity of thank you and correspondence, but it shows that we are all hazard, and we're out there doing everything that we can, you know, to carry out our vision of making this one of the safest communities to live and play in, you know. And fortunately, yeah, that means more tourists will come, but reality is that's really our mission, that's our vision. So it's neat to read that. I hope you at least take a little time to read that. And I believe that ends the chief's report, unless there's any questions, comments.
Any questions for the chief?
I'd like to say that I appreciate those letters being posted in our packet, because they were fun to read, enjoyable to read, and also reinforce what we already know, that we're doing a good job.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Chief, for that report. Okey doke. Next item on the agenda is discussion, possible action for requisition 9151 for a purchase order up to the amount of $27,848.92 to Swift Group LLC for the purchase of turnouts, written by Chief Dave Cochran, but he is not here, so who will be taking that?
So the purchase order is it's a continuation of the purchase order that I brought before you last year, with Chief Cochran here, for the turnouts to complete the turnout replacement schedule as outlined within the NFPA standard for all personnel. So we just switched companies because I think you remember that we had some delays last year because the company that we had that we kept waiting to get a price back from decided they weren't going to sell the turnouts anymore. So this is guaranteed best national price. It's under one of the, I can't remember which, it's a state contract, or is under state, is that which one? It is.
It's under a cooperative purchasing agreement.
Thank you, a cooperative purchasing agreement. And yeah, so that's what it is. Chief Cochran would be here, except he has a grandchild most recently. Yeah, and he is
Congratulations to
in
him.
San Diego enjoying that time. So,
All right, well, thank you.
And this is a budgeted item,
yes, ma'am, it is.
planned in advance. We know about
That's correct.
this.
Yep, it's budgeted and it's all part of the replacement plan for the turnouts. And Chief Cochran did a wonderful job actually with the hose and everything, and for projecting those out to reduce the number of spikes in his budget as we went through those replacement schedules. So,
Okay, with that said, then we'll need a motion to approve or disapprove.
I move to approve requisition 9151 for the purchase of 13 sets of Innotex Energy Gear structural firefighting turnouts from Swift Group LLC totaling $27,848.92.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion is approved, and we can buy those turnouts. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is the discussion possible action for fiscal agent grant agreement among the Ak-Chin Indian Community, Yavapai County, and Sedona Fire District. Chief Trotwine.
Thank you. And so this was one of the grants that we were able to be awarded with the Action Indian Community, and it's relevant to our SUAS, or Small Unmanned Aerial System Program, which we started approximately in 2017. So we did a 2-year kind of pilot on it to develop it and to figure out if this is something that would be applicable, and we believe it is. We've had some great training, some great development in it. This grant will enable us to buy another SUAV platform to continue that program, to train more pilots, and also we'll make it not just available to the Sedona Fire District on fire and rescue response, but we can make it available for law enforcement too, and other agencies. So we feel that this is an innovative tool. There's a lot of systems that have used it to great advantage. We think we can, and this is really just another way for us to advance that program and move it forward. So we're excited about the prospect.
Chief, is that kind of to say that if we were to engage with other agencies, we would send a pilot with that?
Correct. Yeah, we have a draft policy that we're walking down. Actually, it talks about, you know, the qualifications for the pilot and all the parameters that we have to follow per the law. So in that policy, it describes uses with law enforcement. Obviously, if we're filming video footage of a crime scene for law enforcement, then there's certain policy and procedures where we want to have to follow out the legal parameters on that evidence preservation and how we give that to them. And so that's we're working that out now. It's actually Sedona's police chief has looked at it, and their city attorney, hoping to hear back from them on that side of it. And then the rest of it, we've developed pretty good draft policy on, you know, just best practices and FAA requirements, and it's becoming a really good program with the goal to have a minimum of, like we do with our technical rescue team, we have 6 technical rescue personnel on duty every day, so a total of 18 on our team minimum. We want to push the program where we'd have a minimum of 2 pilots a day on, so that we could use the vehicle and follow the policy and operate it safely to accomplish what we need to.
Chief, in terms of using our drone to help the police department, do we charge for that?
Yeah, that will be listed out in the policy. You know, for I don't know if we have, and maybe Jason could comment, I mean, for an extended period, obviously, we'd have that mapped out on use, what the cost would be.
Yeah, right now we've just kind of focused on doing it like as an interagency agreement with a non-compensable interagency agreement, just to assist them. However, we do have personnel that are going through training to meet the NWCG standard for utilizing that piece of equipment. Right now, with only one of them, I doubt that we would send this particular one out of district, but there would be an opportunity to hit the pilots more flight time and to develop another revenue stream by using that on fires, on wildland fires, since they're starting to identify the need for it, and they're actually have identified positions within their qualification system as well. So that's where it sits right now, at least.
Okay.
That's certainly evolving.
Okay. Any other questions for the chiefs? Okay, then I need a motion to be made.
Thank you. I move to approve the fiscal agent granting or grant agreement among Acchen, Indian Community, and Yavapai County, and Sedona Fire District.
And do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that motion passes.
Yeah, I could give a shout out to Sean Foster.
Yes.
He is the one that wrote this grant,
Yes.
and the same one that wrote the grant for our jackets.
Yes.
And I appreciate that. As a firefighter, that is, it's just a tertiary responsibility that he took upon himself, and he's reduced the burden of Sedona's taxpayers by doing that. So.
Perfect. And then on behalf of the fire board here, shout out, thank you very much for all his hard work. Thank you.
That is, you know, something I don't know if we mentioned, it's a $33,000 grant. It's a significant amount of money.
Thank you. Okay, and did we pronounce that correctly? The Acchen?
Sorry.
Acchen.
Acchen.
Is that how you pronounce it?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay, very good.
Acchen.
Make sure we said it correctly. Last item on the agenda is discussion, possible action, review, and approval of lease agreement for Verizon, formerly Southwestco /ATEL at Fire Station 3. Chief Coyle.
So this may look vaguely familiar because you had it in front of you in May. And I think, well, I won't speculate. So this agreement has the language that the board requested in it that protects the Sedona Fires District's interest if there was something that occurred relative to the equipment that Verizon has on there that prevented us from being able to accomplish our mission, that we had the appropriate legal out that Mr. Whittington identified that we should have at that time. And it just took this long to get everyone in alignment on that. And this reflects that. So with the exception of one additional sentence that allows us to give them 1 year's notice to ask them to vacate the tower if need be, it is the same language you approved in May. Yes, sir, please do.
Yeah.
By the way, while you guys are getting those, Acchen is Tohono O'odham for mouth of the wash, or O'odham, the language for mouth of the wash, because that's where at the bottom of where the alluvial plains went out into that area.
Oh, that's cool. I'm sorry I mispronounced it.
I think you did it right. I think you did it right.
Thanks, Gabe.
So folks, if I might, Mr. Chair, the copy you have in your board packet is only slightly different than the one I just handed out. What happened was that we had, as Jason had suggested, there was quite a back and forth with Verizon about this paragraph we wanted to add that allowed you to terminate the lease with 1 year's notice. They finally said yes, but then recently they sent it back to us with a couple of small changes, and we reviewed it and don't have any trouble with those changes, but it made it slightly different than the one in your board packet. So what you have in front of you that I just passed out contains those slight changes that Verizon wanted to make. I just want to walk you through those very quickly to make sure that you're comfortable. On page 2, or excuse me, page 1, paragraph 2, term, they moved the provision subject to the termination provision set forth below. They moved it one line down. Has zero impact legally. I'm not sure why they did that. That's perfectly okay with me. And then on page 3 of paragraph 9, the one in the board packet provides that they're paid up through May 31. They changed it to read that they're paid up through October 31. I assume they have made their payments, and so they wanted to make sure that properly reflected it. That's it.
And they have.
Otherwise, it's good to go. So, Mr. Chair, I have some recommended language for you, if you would like.
For the approving
Yes.
motion.
Yes. And the reason I do that is because Jason mentioned to me that you'd already approved a prior version. This version I just handed out needs to take the place of that. So if it please the board, I'd recommend somebody entertain a motion to rescind the prior lease extension approval of that certain Verizon lease extension amendment and to approve instead the form of First Amendment to lease dated 7/10/19 as submitted to governing board tonight for their consideration.
Bill, I would utilize that verbiage, and with that said, I would need, so moved, and I would need a second. Do I have a second on that?
Second.
We have a second down here. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No opposed. Motion passes. Thank you, Bill, for updating that verbiage. Thank you.
Yeah. I made notes on it. Is that okay? Okay.
With that said, that concludes our agendized item. Without any further ado, we've already had our fire marshal's message. Therefore, our meeting is closed, adjourned. Thank you.